This is 9.6a of algebra. So, the quadratic formula, one of the big exciting parts of algebra. So, this helps us solve quadratics, okay? And this is a quadratic formula, which kind of looks like a mess. I promise it's not that bad. And to help you remember it, there's a song. So I don't claim to be a singer here, but x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It might seem kind of ridiculous to sing a song with a math equation, but I learned this back when I was in high school, and I still remember it, and every time I use the quadratic formula, I sing it in my head. So, let's try using it. I will write it up over here for you. So, just like when we were factoring, we need this to be equal to 0. Okay? So here's our equation. Let's write it out over here on the left. So x squared minus 4x equals 21. So I need this to be 0. So I'm going to subtract 21 from both sides. We get x squared minus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Now I can figure out what my a, b, and c are. So here's our standard formula. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So basically, a is your first number, b is your second number, and c is your third number. So a is matching up here. If there's no number in front, that means that a is 1. B matches up with negative 4, and c matches up with negative 21. And now we're going to plug that in. Okay? So x is equal to negative b. So negative 4, right? There's a built-in negative, and our b is negative. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so I plugged it in and I realize it kind of looks crazy perhaps, but it's really not that bad if you take it one step at a time. Negative 4, a negative and a negative makes a positive, so this is just a plain 4, plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared is 16, and I always keep this minus sign, okay? And then on my calculator, I'm going to multiply these three numbers here. Okay, so on my calculator, 4 times 1 times negative 21 gives me negative 84. All over 2 times 1 is 2. And now from here on out, all we're simplifying is that square root there until we get to our last step. So x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. That minus a negative turns into a plus. So this is 16 plus 84 over 2. And again, 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 84 gives us 100 over 2. Then we're going to simplify that again. That's 4 plus or minus the square root of 100 is 10. Now, here's our last step. Remember when we were working with completing the square and we get a plus or a minus and we make two equations? Same thing here. Since we have a plus and minus, we need to make two different equations. One will be 4 plus 10 over 2, and one will be 4 minus 10 over 2. So 4 plus 10, that's 14, so this turns into 14 over 2, which is 7. 4 minus 10, that's negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. So our two answers are x equals 7 and x equals negative 3. Okay, we can use this same thing for story problems, okay? So we're going to do this one about a batter in a baseball game. Here's our quadratic equation. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Yeah, it'll help you if you memorize it, just letting you know. So here's our equation. Y equals negative 0.005 x squared plus 0.7x plus 3.5. So here's the big difference. It's a story problem, so that's going to change our answer at the end, and you'll see how. The other thing is that we're using decimals right now, right? So you're going to do the same process. It might look a little bit more complicated because there's decimals in there. One other thing you might notice is this is y equals. And you might say, hey, well, last time we had to have it 0 equals. Here's the deal. If we look at our problem, what it's actually asking, it says, how far from the batter will the ball land? Well, what y is telling us is the height of the ball. If the ball lands, that means that y is 0, right? The height is 0. So really, we're looking at this where y is 0. So if it helps, put the 0 in place. And if you need to compare it to our standard formula, or standard equation, I should say. So we get that a is equal to negative 0.005, b is equal to 0.7, and c is equal to 3.5. And now we can plug it into the quadratic formula. So x is equal to negative b, so negative 0.7, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, now we simplify. I can't simplify this front guy. He stays the same, so negative 0.7 plus or minus the square root. Now on my calculator, I'm going to do 0.7 squared, which is 0.49. Again, we keep the minus sign, and then I'm going to simplify this stuff this stuff without that minus sign. I'm going to do 4 times negative 0.005 times 3.5. Okay? And we get negative 0.07 all over negative 0.01. Okay, and from here on out, I'm basically just simplifying the square root until we get to the very end. So this is the square root of 0.49 plus 0.07. And then we simplify it again. Underneath the square root, we're going to get 0.56. And we're almost there, because now we can take the square root of 0.56. And I'm going to round that to be 0.75. Now I can make my two equations. So negative 0.7 plus 0.75 over negative 0.01. And we get negative 0.7 minus 0.75 over negative 0.01. So up here, negative 0.7 plus 0.75, that'll be 0.05 over negative 0.01. 0.05 over negative 0.01 gives me a negative 5. And then down here, negative 0.7 minus 0.75 will give me a negative 1.45. And that's over negative 0.01. And if I divide those, we get a positive 145. Okay, this is a story problem, so here's where your answers come into play. We want to know how far from the batter will the ball land. Can the ball land negative 5 feet away from the batter? No, negative feet doesn't make sense, right? So while negative 5 was an answer, it's not something that makes sense in this case. So the only thing that makes sense is the 145 feet. And that will be our answer. And there's your homework.